Welcome, seekers of hidden truths, to the History Uncovered, where we unearth the mysteries buried beneath the sands of time. If you find value in our explorations, please support us by subscribing and sharing our journey with fellow history enthusiasts. Today, we venture into treacherous waters to reveal the terrifying facts about Atlantis that have haunted scholars for millennia. Stay with us until the very end, for what you discover may forever change how you view this legendary civilization. First, the pride before the storm. The morning sun rose over Atlantis and painted the concentric rings of water in shades of molten gold. Merchants opened their stalls beneath marble colonnades, while children played in gardens that seemed to bloom with impossible colors. The great harbor teemed with vessels from distant lands carrying tributes of ivory, spices, and precious metals. Atlantean admirals watched from obsidian towers, their expressions betraying neither gratitude nor humility toward their visitors. King Evanor's descendants had ruled for 10 generations, each monarch more ambitious than the last. The current ruler sat upon a throne carved from a single orichalcum crystal, believing himself descended from Poseidon himself. The streets were paved with stones that absorbed sunlight and glowed softly through the night hours. Citizens walked these luminous pathways, dressed in robes of woven silver thread, looking upon foreigners with barely concealed disdain. Priests proclaimed from temple steps that Atlantis had been chosen to rule all nations of the earth. The common people repeated these declarations as absolute truth, never questioning the arrogance embedded within them. The palace complex sprawled across the central island, its walls inscribed with laws that elevated Atlanteans above all other peoples. Foreign ambassadors were made to kneel for hours before gaining audience with minor officials. Farmers in the outer rings cultivated crops using techniques they believed the gods had gifted exclusively to their bloodline. They laughed at the primitive methods of mainland peoples, calling them children fumbling in darkness. Engineers constructed aqueducts that carried water uphill through means no foreign scholar could comprehend or replicate. They guarded these secrets jealously, executing any worker who spoke to outsiders. The military trained in vast arenas, practicing formations designed not for defense, but for conquest of the entire known world. Generals drew maps showing every nation colored in Atlantean blue, awaiting inevitable annexation. Philosophers debated not whether Atlantis should dominate humanity, but merely the timeline for achieving total supremacy. They calculated that within 3 generations, no independent kingdom would remain standing. The pride of Atlantis had grown so absolute that warning signs from nature itself went completely unnoticed. Small tremors shook the outer islands, but citizens dismissed them as Poseidon stretching in his sleep. Second, temples of forbidden knowledge. The Temple of the Forgotten stood at the city's heart, its doors open only to those who had renounced all fear. Inside, corridors descended into depths that seemed to swallow torchlight itself. Priests of this order wore masks carved from the bones of creatures that had no names in any human language. They moved silently through underground chambers, performing rituals that predated even Atlantean memory. Ancient texts within these vaults described powers that existed before the gods shaped the world from chaos. The priests studied these manuscripts obsessively, believing they could harness primordial forces for Atlantean glory. Sacrificial chambers deep beneath the temple bore stains that no amount of washing could ever remove. The screams that echoed from these depths during certain lunar phases kept nearby residents awake with unnamed dread. Young initiates entered the priesthood full of ambition and emerged years later with hollow eyes and trembling hands. Many spoke in languages they had never learned, whispering secrets that drove listeners to madness. The high priest possessed a staff topped with a stone that pulsed with its own inner light, regardless of surrounding darkness. Those who gazed upon it too long reported seeing visions of impossible geometries and entities beyond comprehension. Libraries within the temple complex contained knowledge stolen from civilizations Atlantis had conquered and subsequently erased from history. These peoples had understood dangers the Atlanteans foolishly chose to ignore. Experiments conducted in sealed laboratories sought to blur the boundaries between life and death itself. The creatures that sometimes escaped these facilities were hunted down and destroyed before common citizens could witness them. Crystal spheres stored within iron cages could show observers events happening on distant continents in real time. Some spheres revealed not distant places, but distant times, displaying futures that drove viewers to despair. The priests believed they had discovered the frequency at which reality itself vibrated and could potentially be unraveled. They tested this theory in small ways, creating localized distortions that warped space within sealed chambers. What the priests never understood was that their experiments had attracted attention from intelligences that existed beyond the fabric of the physical world. These entities watched Atlantis with growing interest, waiting for the perfect moment. Third, the night the gods awakened. The celebration of the harvest moon drew citizens from every ring of the city to the central plaza. Musicians played instruments of crystal and bronze, while dancers moved in patterns that honored Poseidon's eternal protection. King Atlas VII addressed his people from the great balcony, proclaiming that Atlantis had finally achieved perfection in all things. The crowd cheered with genuine belief, having never known defeat or significant hardship. Beneath the festivities, the priests of the Forgotten Temple conducted their most ambitious ritual, yet in chambers far below. They chanted words that had not been spoken aloud since the world was young. The first tremor struck as the king raised his golden cup in toast to eternal Atlantean supremacy. Wine spilled across his ceremonial robes, staining the white fabric with spreading crimson patterns. Citizens looked at one another with confusion rather than fear, for earthquakes were mere curiosities in their experience. The music continued for several more moments before the second tremor knocked musicians from their platforms. The harbor waters began to recede with unnatural speed, exposing seafloor that had never seen sunlight in recorded history. Sailors watched in horror as their ships settled onto mud alongside creatures from lightless depths. Cracks appeared in the great lighthouse of the western harbor, spreading upward like dark veins through pale stone. The eternal flame at its peak flickered for the first time in 300 years. The sky above Atlantis changed from clear starlight to a churning mass of clouds that seemed to spiral inward toward the temple district. Lightning struck the palace dome, shattering the crystal apex into a million falling fragments. The sea returned not as waves, but as a single towering wall of black water visible from every corner of the empire. Citizens finally screamed, understanding in their last moments that no human engineering could withstand such force. The temples collapsed first, their underground chambers flooding with seawater that quenched the eternal fires and drowned the chanting priests. Whatever they had summoned or disturbed vanished with them into silence. Within a single hour, the greatest civilization the ancient world had ever known was reduced to nothing but foam and memory. The sun rose the next morning over empty ocean, as if Atlantis had never existed at all. Fourth, weapons that defied nature. Before the catastrophe, Atlantean arsenals contained instruments of destruction that neighboring civilizations could barely comprehend. These weapons were not merely tools of war, but technological achievements that bordered on the supernatural. The sun towers positioned along the outer walls could focus daylight into beams that ignited enemy vessels from impossible distances. Entire invasion fleets had been reduced to ash before reaching within arrow range of Atlantean shores. Crystal resonators buried beneath siege walls could generate vibrations that caused enemy fortifications to crumble into powder from within. Kingdoms surrendered upon merely witnessing demonstrations of this terrible capability. Atlantean soldiers carried hand weapons that released concentrated lightning through mechanisms powered by orichalcum cores. A single warrior with such a device could defeat dozens of conventionally armed opponents. Submersible vessels allowed Atlantean marines to approach enemy harbors completely undetected beneath the water surface. They would emerge at night, completing their missions and vanishing before dawn revealed their presence. Flying machines patrolled the skies above Atlantean territory, giving commanders awareness of enemy movements across vast distances. No army could approach without the Atlanteans knowing their numbers, positions, and likely intentions. The most terrifying weapons were never deployed against foreign enemies, but existed only as contingencies against domestic threats. These devices could allegedly poison water supplies for entire regions or render farmland barren for generations. Captured enemy generals described interrogation chambers where Atlantean officers could extract truthful answers through machinery that interfaced directly with human thought. No secret could be kept from such invasive methods. The weapons laboratories occupied an entire island ring, staffed by engineers who never interacted with ordinary citizens. They developed prototypes for devices that even the military leadership considered too dangerous for actual deployment. Some scholars believe the catastrophe itself may have resulted from a weapons test that exceeded all expected parameters. The energy released might have destabilized the very tectonic plates supporting the Atlantean continent. Whether natural disaster or technological suicide, the weapons of Atlantis vanished beneath the waves along with everything else. Perhaps this was the world's mercy, preventing such terrible instruments from ever being rediscovered. Fifth, the eternal curse of Atlantis. Sailors who venture near the suspected location of sunken Atlantis report phenomena that defy rational explanation. Compasses spin wildly, equipment fails without cause, and crew members experience shared hallucinations of impossible architecture beneath the waves. Ancient mariners avoided these waters, passing down warnings through generations that certain coordinates meant certain death. They spoke of ghost lights rising from the depths and the sound of bells tolling from drowned towers. Plato recorded the tale of Atlantis from Egyptian priests who claimed the destruction was divine punishment for hubris beyond measure. They warned that the curse extended to any who sought to recover Atlantean knowledge or treasures. Medieval maps marked the suspected location with illustrations of sea monsters and drowning souls reaching toward the surface. Cartographers believed the site remained supernaturally dangerous, a wound in the world that never healed. Expeditions seeking Atlantean artifacts have experienced misfortune rates far exceeding statistical probability across centuries of attempts. Ships sink in calm waters, crew members suffer mysterious illnesses, and findings disappear under unexplained circumstances. Some researchers suggest that whatever the priests of the Forgotten Temple awakened still lingers at the site of their ritual. It remains trapped beneath miles of ocean, patient and hungry, and awaiting any disturbance. Local fishing communities near suspected Atlantean locations maintain taboos against certain practices and places inherited from distant ancestors. They cannot explain these prohibitions, but feel compelled to honor them nonetheless. Dreams of drowning cities reportedly afflict visitors to regions near possible Atlantean sites with unusual frequency and vivid detail. The dreamers often describe architecture and clothing consistent with ancient accounts, despite having no prior knowledge. The message of Atlantis echoes through millennia as a warning against the pride that precedes destruction of all civilizations. Every empire that has risen to dominance has eventually fallen, often through flaws of its own creation. Perhaps the true curse of Atlantis is not supernatural at all, but simply the pattern of human nature repeating throughout history. We build monuments to our greatness while ignoring the cracks forming in our foundations. The ocean keeps its secrets beneath crushing depths and absolute darkness, preserving whatever remains of Atlantean glory and folly together. Whether those secrets should ever be disturbed remains a question with no comfortable answer. And so concludes our journey into the terrifying depths of Atlantean history and legend. We have walked the luminous streets of a civilization drunk on its own magnificence, witnessed the forbidden rituals that invited doom, and understood why the gods themselves may have demanded such absolute destruction. The story of Atlantis reminds us that no achievement, however magnificent, and protect a people from the consequences of their own arrogance. What lies beneath those ancient waves continues to haunt human imagination and perhaps serves as an eternal warning. If this exploration has captivated your imagination, please honor us with your like and share your thoughts in the comments below. Subscribe to The History Uncovered and activate the notification bell to join us on future expeditions into history's greatest mysteries.